You might think this moment spells the end for Max Butler, the former king of the cybercrime underworld. It wasn't, because Max Butler, also known as Iceman, wasn't just arrested by the FBI, he also worked for them, feeding them intel on the criminal underworld and helping take down other hackers. But how was that possible? Max was one of the bad guys, or was he? This is the story of how Max went from black hat hacker to white hat hacker and back again. I'm Caleb, and this video was created by Sumsub, the verification platform. We make the digital world people-friendly, yet still secure. Where it began. Max grew up in the rural town of Meridian, Idaho, where in the 1980s, rodeo champions got the girls, and computer geeks like Max got nothing. But Max had something the other kids didn't, a skill that in just a few years would make him known, feared, and admired all around the world. Growing up, Max's father ran a computer store, and he was surrounded by machines, from giant desk-sized business computers to the very first portable IBM compatibles. In high school, Max found community in the local BBS scene. He was a troubled student, carrying printouts of Frack, a hackazine, to class, and freaking phone calls, which earned him a very special visitor, the Secret Service, there in his school to warn him off the path he was heading down. The warning did little to stop Max's crimes, which escalated from computer crime to physical crimes, vandalism, chemical theft, even assault, earning him a 5-year prison sentence, becoming a white hat hacker. In 1995, Max made parole. He'd learned his lesson and was done flirting with the law, or so he thought. Now a free man in his mid-20s, Max moved to San Francisco to start over. The dot-com economy was hitting critical mass, and a talented computer whiz like himself could bootstrap into Silicon Valley without any questions asked about his past. Max administered whitehats.com for ethical hackers, a popular site back in the day, and rented himself out as a white hat hacker for hire. For $100 per hour, Max pen tested for corporate clients, moving from one attack vector to another until he found a way in. Max was good at his job, too good, and way too bored. To Max, white hat hacking was like playing checkers when you're made for chess. Max spent his off hours traipsing through private networks, the kind of intrusion he spent daylight hours defending his clients against. Max's reputation had grown to legendary status. He was a rock star in the computer security world, and the FBI had taken note. Soon enough, FBI agent Chris Beeson came knocking on Max's door. But it was help he wanted, not his surrender. Max joined the FBI as a criminal informant, putting his elite hacking skills to legal use, catching real criminals of the underground, cyber thieves, child exploitation offenders, and even terrorists. At first, Max loved his work with the FBI, but neither he nor the FBI knew that Max would soon become one of the real criminals he'd been working to catch. Max's double life was about to collapse, and it all started with the letters B-I-N-D. In 1998, a critical security hole was discovered in the Berkeley Internet name domain, BIND for short, an internet program as important as any router or fiber optic cable. Without BIND, the internet as we know it wouldn't exist, as it translated domain names like yahoo.com into IP addresses. Max's competitive streak kicked in. He'd fixed the flaw himself before bad actors could exploit it. But then, Max made a choice that would change his life forever. Max had long been torn between the thrill of black hat hacking and the glory of being the good guy. But this time, he didn't choose between the hats. He decided to wear both. A few weeks later, there was a knock at the door. It was the same FBI agents Max had been working with, but now they weren't there for his help, but to arrest him. The FBI had traced Max through notifications he had installed when fixing the BIND flaw. The only problem was that his fix included a backdoor that only he controlled, which gave him access to high-profile government-critical infrastructure networks and government health services. Max had both fixed the problem and exploited it. He thought he did a good thing, but the FBI had a different opinion. And so 3 years after being released from prison, Max was headed back inside for round 2. 18 months later, Max was released, but his reputation was now trashed. Security firms wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole, and the white hat hacker doors that once flung open for him were now completely shut. Max swore right then and there that he would turn his life around for good, but the timing couldn't have been worse. Max had been released just in time for the cybercrime gold rush. A new generation of Cardiff forums had infused the dark web with an entrepreneurial hustle never seen before. Recreational hacking was dead, and in its place, a merciless digital underworld where hackers preyed on others for profit, the Carter's market. It was all very tempting, but Max did not want to risk his newfound freedom if he could help it. But stuck with a resume nobody wanted to touch, and burdened by skyrocketing San Francisco rent, Max was running out of options. He'd hatched a plan to set himself up for life and catapult out of the crime world for good. But first, to escape the criminal underworld, he'd have to move further into it than he'd ever been before. Max started with the carding scene, criminals who steal and sell credit card information. Years earlier, thieves would dumpster dive for receipts and steal card numbers that way. By the time Max got out of prison, Visa and MasterCard had cleaned up their security with CVV cards. Now criminals were after mag stripe data, which by the early 2000s was the most valuable commodity on the dark web. To get it, criminals partnered with corrupt waitstaff or gas station attendees, wielding pocket-sized skimmers to unlock the card's DNA, or mounted stationary skimmers on ATM pin pads. But Max wasn't interested in recruiting crooks. Why bother when an ample supply source was sitting in plain sight? Carders themselves would be his prey. He would cut out the middleman and steal directly from the thieves. He was a bit rusty from his time behind bars. Max checked into hotel rooms and lurked in online chat rooms, sniffing out the weakest cyber crooks. And then, whilst posing as a well-known dumps vendor called Hummer 911, Max fired off a message announcing he had bought more American Express dumps than he could sell or use. Click here, Max wrote, to get your free Amex. When gullible carders clicked, hidden code exploited an Internet Explorer flaw that took advantage of Internet Explorer's HTML application feature. Once inside their systems, Max vacuumed up credit card data, passwords, and pins by the thousands, feeding them to his partner, Chris Aragon, who stamped out counterfeit cards and passed them on to young women to load up on luxury goods for them to flip on eBay. Selling from thieves allowed Max to sleep at night. Max convinced himself that it wasn't hurting anyone directly, as consumers weren't liable for fraudulent charges. But he couldn't shake the #1 lesson he learned from his time in prison.
Don't you trust anybody?
No.
It's a horrible way to live.
For me, it's the only way.
The Carter market grew fast and unruly, splintering across dark websites, each riddled with informants and security holes. When Max, the white hat, saw something broken, he had to fix it. But he also couldn't risk going back to prison. Messing around with a system this compromised was a one-way ticket back inside. In 2004, his paranoia proved justified. Operation Firewall was the biggest law enforcement operation against cybercriminals to date, taking down Shadow Crew, a Carter site with 4,000 members, one of whom was an informant, Albert Gonzalez, a Shadow Crew administrator. He had compromised the site's access VPN, which led to dozens of arrests and sent shockwaves of panic through the Carter scene. The FBI and Secret Service were now recruiting informants from within the underground. Max needed a marketplace he could trust, so in 2005, he set up Carter's Market, and it was an instant success. Max hacked into greedy banks and massive payment processors, distributing price lists per card data. Within a year, Carter's Market had pulled in 1,500 buyers and sellers. Max, now operating under the alias Iceman, was climbing the ranks of the dark web elite. But as his reputation grew, so did his ego, and his plans of going straight had faded, replaced by new ambition. Max wasn't looking to escape the criminal underworld anymore. He had new plans to rule over it. The forced merger. He'd planted the seeds weeks ago, registering accounts on rival forums and exploited vulnerabilities in the forum software. Max settled into his chair, fingers on the keyboard, and began his attack. He broke into each site one by one, draining their content and then running the drop command wiping the databases clean with the ease of an arsonist flicking a match. On August 16, 2006, an email landed in the inboxes of thousands of carders around the world, announcing news of a hostile takeover, signed Iceman. Max was now the king of the underground, the ruler of the largest criminal marketplace the dark web had ever seen. But as he was about to learn, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. The countdown. In the days that followed, Max's defeated rivals raged against the forced merger. They fought hard to regain their users and staged weak counterattacks with no success. But Max's newfound enemies had one final move up their sleeve, the most dangerous play in the criminal underworld. 1 year later, the FBI and Secret Service tracked Max down, thanks to Giannone, a co-administrator of the Carter's Market website and an undercover informant. But the authorities had a big problem. Max used DriveCrypt, a military-grade encryption that locked down his hard drive tight and impenetrable. If the FBI wanted to catch Max, they had to catch his computer running. The encryption key sat in the RAM, letting the software decrypt data on the fly. But if Max pulled the plug, the key vanished and the hard drive became as useless to investigators as a frisbee. The FBI hatched a plan to knock on the door, distract Max, and grab him before he could reach the power button. They had one chance to get this right. On the afternoon of September 5th, 2007, FBI agents approached Max's apartment. They knocked, no answer. So they knocked again. Crickets. If Max were inside and heard them, he would wipe everything in seconds. The team leader gave the signal, and the agents burst through the door, guns drawn. As Max stirred from his nap, disoriented, his hands were yanked behind his back, barely processing what was going on. Behind the agents, CERT experts were waiting, and they rushed to this machine. The servers were still running. Working fast, the CERT experts deployed memory acquisition software, capturing live data from the RAM onto the external storage device. After the arrest, Max's attorney mounted a fierce defense, arguing that Max could use his expertise to protect the nation against cyber terrorists, that he could be an asset and not a liability. But the FBI had heard that pitch before. They'd given him a second chance, and he burned them. Max was looking at a 30-year sentence. His only chance of some respite was to cooperate with the authorities, and so he did. Max pleaded guilty to stealing and selling the magstripe data of 1.8 million cards, which accumulated into $86 million worth of fraudulent charges. Max received a reduced 13-year sentence, which was still a record-breaking sentence for computer crimes. For years, Max served his time quietly. He kept his mind sharp by reading hundreds of books, a brief distraction from the relentless brewing within. Max missed the thrill of hacking, where he could outsmart the system and intrude every forbidden corner of the internet. For years, he withstood the temptation, but in October of 2014, his release date now just around the corner, a T-Mobile Android found its way into Max's hands. If anyone knew he had it, his near freedom would be gone, and so for months on end, the phone stayed hidden, tucked beneath his sheets and wedged into seams. Max used the phone sparingly, texting Jason here and there through an encrypted messaging app. Jason was his former cellmate, who had stayed local post-release. Released, but hardly reformed. Max, on the other hand, really tried to stay out of trouble. But as the end of his sentence neared, the itch he so desperately wanted to scratch became too much to bear. Max's fingers found the keyboard again. He logged in to hacker forums through the anonymized Tor browser. The screen glowed in his dim cell as the digital underworld opened up before his eyes. Max had a plan that required coordination from both sides of the prison walls. His fellow inmates, they were all in on it, but only Max had the skills to make it happen. In the early hours of April 24, 2016, a drone lifted off its launch pad, climbing silently into the night sky. It sailed toward the barbed wire fence surrounding the Oakdale Federal Correctional Center. It passed over the second wired fence and hovered briefly over the prison recreation yard. Then a bag dropped. It fell from the drone, landing on the ground with a thud. Two inmates materialized from the shadows, snatched the bag, and slunk back into their cell block as the drone flew away. By morning, the contents of the bag had vanished, distributed amongst inmates. None of it was to be seen again. Nothing from that drop was ever recovered, not even when there was a snitch. The very next day, prison staff received a tip. Surveillance footage was reviewed, and 2 inmates were identified picking up the bag, filled with drugs, cell phones, and contraband. One of the culprits, Philip Tyler Hammonds, confessed immediately, but he pointed to Max as the mastermind behind the entire operation. Max was thrown into solitary confinement, and there he stayed. He pleaded innocent, claiming he'd been thrown under the bus over a Pathfinder rules dispute. After a year-long investigation, Max was found guilty of obtaining stolen debit card numbers, using the profits to buy a drone, and then orchestrating the contraband drop with Jason. Today, the trail on Max, the Iceman, has gone cold. Whether he can truly change remains an open question, one not even he can answer with confidence. From prison, Max said, "I really believe that I'm reformed, but I don't know what's going to happen later." And with that said, we'll see you in the next one.